Welcome to the Soul Well podcast, where moms of color find strength and community in the mental health space. Each week, we ignite inspiration as we set our intentions with affirmations and dive deep into honest conversations with fellow moms and mental health experts. We're here to hold space for you, to shatter stigmas and elevate the voices of moms of color. We'll fight for policy change, empower you with mindful resources, and most importantly, remind you that you're never alone on this journey. It takes a village to raise a mother. Now let's meet at the well. Today we're holding space for a topic that requires immense tenderness and understanding, the experience of infant and baby loss. We want to acknowledge right at the start that this is a deeply sensitive subject. If listening feels too difficult for you right now, please honor that feeling. We encourage you to prioritize your well-being. Feel free to pause, skip this episode, or return to it when you feel ready. For those of you joining us, whether you've walked this path yourself, are supporting someone who has, or simply wish to understand more, thank you for being here with an open heart. Our intention today is to approach this conversation with compassion, respect, and a desire to break the silence that often surrounds this profound form of grief. We hope to offer validation, support, and perhaps a glimmer of a shared experience. Let's gently begin. Today, my guest is Alishia Anderson. She is a life transition and grief support coach who helps angel moms honor their angel babies while embracing their unique motherhood journeys. She partners with those experiencing grief and life transitions to move from existing to thriving. Through online advocacy, BIPOC support groups, and her memoir, Still Here, Alicia has supported countless families through baby loss. Her mission is to end the silence, secrecy, and shame around grief, fostering open dialogue and healing. And with that, let's jump into today's episode. Hey, mamas, and welcome to the So Well podcast. Hi, I have my guest Alicia here. Welcome, welcome, welcome.
Thank you for having me. I'm so honored to be here today.
Yes, I'm so excited for us to, finally get a chance to have this conversation. And you and I connected, I know, on social media, and but I want my audience to kind of get to know you as well. The beginning of all of our episodes, we have a segment called the Mom Space, which is where our guests have an opportunity to share about their story, their journey, or anything that they would like to introduce themselves to our audience.
So what a loaded question, but my name is Alicia. And I always say my journey into motherhood was nothing like I envisioned. I always start with my love story. So I met my husband at what my family calls nerd camp. We met we were both engineering majors, and so we met at this internship in 2007.
That's
And
so cool, though. I love it.
thank you. I literally thought I would never see this person ever again, and God had other plans. But so we dated long distance for 4 years. And we dated long distance until we got married. So we never lived in the same space until we got married in 2012. And so when people always used to say like, "Oh, when are you guys going to start a family?" It was like, "Hey, pump the brakes. Nope, not yet." I just wanted to kind of like enjoy my husband. And so once we got pregnant, we were so thrilled. And that was 2015 that we got pregnant. So 3 years after getting married, and everything was amazing until it wasn't. And I had a stillbirth for my first pregnancy, and that journey introduced me to motherhood. And so it looked nothing like I thought it would look like. And it really kind of rocked me to my core, very much shifted the trajectory of where I thought my life would be headed. So I always say that motherhood was very much unexpected in the way that I didn't plan it that way. And then when I had my second son, who I call my rainbow baby, he was born 6 weeks early. So he ended up in the NICU for a week. And so trauma with additional trauma. And then my last son was born during COVID. So Just a lot of things that were unplanned in motherhood. So I always say, like, motherhood is something that we can dream about and we have all our plans, and God laughs at those plans. And you just got to kind of roll with the flow, as it comes to you.
Yeah.
But it's been rewarding, it's been challenging, but I would not trade it for the world.
Yes, yes. Thank you so much for sharing that story with me. And it's a perfect segue because our topic and our theme for today's episode is talking about life after baby loss, and we are going to be digging deeper into your story as you talk to us about what your experiences has been like. And one of the things that you said to me that really resonated with me is that we have plans and God laughs at our plans. And that is true for, I feel like, so many areas. And it's true for all aspects of motherhood. I feel like we get sold this dream of like what it's going to be like when we're a kid, when we're a girl, when we're playing with our dolls. And, we're like, oh, it's going to be this one way. And no one truly prepares you for what it's going to be like. And I don't necessarily know if these conversations and books and all that is even going to prepare you, because everyone's journey is uniquely their own. And
Yeah,
so we can do as much as we can to share, to uplift, to like share our stories and continue to, put the narrative out there. But it's important to note that we can plan, but God still may have another plan, and things
exactly.
go the way that they go. So
Exactly.
yes, yes. So I want to kind of, since we started on the heavier topic, I want to kind of just continue with that and just talk a little bit about, you know, what that experience was like for you, right? I want to talk about you. I mean, I don't know, actually. I don't know what that experience is like, but I can imagine that it was difficult. And I want you to just kind of talk about, if you can, what that experience was like for you and your partner,
Yeah,
whether, in the beginning.
absolutely. So, like I said, we waited a little bit to have kids. And so when we were ready, we were like, okay, now we're like fully in this thing. So when we got pregnant, literally everything went perfectly. Like, the doctor told me, "Oh, it's probably going to take you about a year to get pregnant." I literally got pregnant the next month after we had that conversation. So it was like
Mhm.
very much ease. Everything was like appointments. He looks amazing. You're amazing. Like everything was just rolling like it perfect and
Right.
text wise. And the crazy thing is that my husband and I were like, we're not gonna really share that we're pregnant until after we get out the danger zone, which is definitely a
Mhm.
myth. Everybody's like, after your first trimester, then you can share.
Yes.
We like
Mhm.
waited that 12 weeks. My husband's like, do not tell anybody. So we're waiting. And when we finally were able to share, we were so excited. We probably shared like midway through my second trimester. And at my 28-week appointment, I went in for the glucose test where you take the drink and you wait. And so while we're waiting on the drink to work, the nurse said, "Oh, let me just bring you back and we'll do like an ultrasound just to check on baby, see how he's doing." We go back there. I mean, my husband and I are super excited. And then I just remember her saying, "Oh, there's not a lot of fluid around the baby." And as a first time mom, I literally didn't know what that meant. I was like, okay, I'll drink more water, like nothing in my mind registered that something was wrong. And so she's like, I'm going to go get the doctor. And I knew that that wasn't good, but my husband was like, we're just going to wait and hear what she has to say. Like, he was my voice of reason there. And they took me back to where the doctors were, cleaned off my stomach, took us to this office. I can like recall it to this day. It was like a gray wall and two doctors sitting at the desk. One had a thing of tissue. So I'm like, okay, processing in my mind, this is not good, but still not knowing what it meant. And they were like, I'm so sorry to tell you, but your baby no longer has a heartbeat. And it after that, it just felt like, in the Charlie Brown when he's like, womp, 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 womp. It literally felt like my world was spinning in a matter of minutes. Like, my life literally changed in minutes. So they let themselves out the room for a second just to kind of give my husband and myself some time to process what they were saying. And then they asked if they could, when they came back in, they asked, how do we want to proceed? And we're just literally like, we don't even know what to do right now. So they suggested that we come in and have me induce. So at the time I was like 7, 8 months pregnant, 7.5 months pregnant.
Wow.
And so it was just like going from like you're almost at the finish line to you're going into the hospital and you have to have this baby.
Mhm.
So they were like, you're gonna have to have him. We'll induce you and you'll birth him like a normal birth. And so when I went home that night, I two things stick out in my mind from that experience. One, I Googled what do you call a baby that dies at 28 weeks because I had no idea. That's where I heard the term stillbirth for the first time
Mhm.
after me
Mhm.
Googling it. And
Mhm.
so I remember texting all my friends and just letting them know what happened. And I was like, please don't call me. I'm trying to process, but one of my friends texted me back and said, I know this is going to sound crazy, but I think you should see your baby. And I know that sounds crazy. Like it's a baby that died. But she was like, my cousin went through this experience and it's a piece of closure that I think you will appreciate down the line. And so
Mhm.
that kind of stuck in the back of my mind. But
Mhm.
we Googled what the baby could possibly look like. So I think that kind of helped set my mind up for what was to come. And then the
Right.
other thing I remember is my husband calling all of our parents, and in my book, I talk about how it felt like bombs literally being detonated. Like everybody's like, "Oh my god, is she in the hospital?" Like they were
Mhm.
excited, but it was like, "No, the baby is gone." So
Right.
I just remember like literally, it felt like we were just ripping the hearts out of our parents one by one.
Mhm.
And lastly, I remember that evening, going home and just journaling, like writing literally till my hand got tired. I cried and I prayed and I said, God, I need you to give me peace. Like peace. Like I could not explain it, but when I went to the hospital the following day, that was a Friday when my appointment was. They induced me that Saturday morning. And I remember walking into that hospital like, I don't know how I'm gonna do this. I don't think
Mhm.
I can do it. And my husband's like, we're gonna get through this. I don't know what this part of our journey is for, but I think God is up to something. And when we walked in, there was this nurse that literally just hugged me and she's like, we're gonna get through this, baby. Like, and I just melted like in her arms.
Mhm.
And from
Mhm.
that piece moving forward, I knew that God was in the mix of my story. I didn't know how he would be, but he definitely showed up in a lot of ways in the hospital.
Yeah. Yeah. Wow. Thank you for sharing. That's such a story. And when I hear it, I hear sadness that comes from you, but I also hear like when you say you prayed for peace in the midst of that,
Yeah.
that is God ordained, that is strength, that comes from a mother.
Absolutely.
And I'm so and when I hear your story, I'm impacted to think about, the journey, right? Like not everybody, like, going through this motherhood journey is never going to be the same, and not everybody's story and experience is as, beautiful. Um, but I love that you were able to see some peace in that. And I heard you say that your second son is your rainbow baby, which I know is a term that's used in this. And
Mhm.
we're going to get to your book as well, but you talked about the detonation of these bombings that you're dropping on the family. Um, I cannot imagine. I don't have the words. I'm like trying to form like, oh, what is the next question? But also trying to honor the space, right,
Thank
of it.
you. Yeah,
Because yeah. Go ahead.
it's hard to hear, but
Yeah.
I like to tell this piece of my story because there are so many people that experience this and they never get to share this piece.
Yeah.
And so by me sharing, I want it to be a piece of validation for them and for their story, but also for their babies, because oftentimes these babies are forgotten. Um,
Yeah.
I made that a point in my motherhood journey to make sure that I honored my firstborn son. His name is DJ. We honor him often in our home. And so
Mhm.
it's eh, I can't get to motherhood without him being a part
Right.
of the journey. And so I
Yeah.
know it's really hard to hear, But for me, it's almost like he ushered in my motherhood. And so I have to
Yeah.
honor his presence, his legacy, his life, even though it's very brief. I give him that space because he's the one that made me a mom, and I get to continue with my living children.
Yes, yes. And I love that you say that you honor him in the space because I don't I know I personally have never heard anybody share a story like this. And so
Mhm.
you sharing your story and the bravery behind doing that, I'm sure will, hopefully help another mom find a way to connect with it because so often, like you said, they are forgotten. You don't hear about
Yeah.
these stories. And
Yeah.
do you think that from your perspective, whether it's talking to other moms or not, why they may forget or feel as though they shouldn't honor. Like I feel sometimes people may just, and I don't know, but because I haven't heard these stories, and if
Yeah.
we're saying that they're out there, why aren't people sharing them? Do you feel like there's shame or guilt, or what
Oh,
are you
absolutely.
hearing?
So I've worked in a lot of avenues in this space. So we call it the baby loss space, but so
Mhm.
I literally found like community online with people that have experienced loss. However, a lot of them do not look like us. And so
Mhm.
I wanted to make it a point to show that Black women, women of color are in this space and often are the leaders in these categories of loss. So
Mm.
Black women are 2 times more likely to have a loss or stillbirth than white women. But often we're silenced even in the community that is meant to support us. You don't often
Mm.
see it. So I wanted to make sure, one, that I was a face representing these stories that are untold. But two, I think just in general, people are very uncomfortable with grief and
Right.
loss, talking about death. And so it's very hidden, even though it's in plain sight. Like you can see when someone is pregnant and you can see when they come back and they don't have a baby. And so I think it's important to really sit in the uncomfortableness of these type of topics because that's what ushers in the the platform to be able to talk about it freely, like I do. Like I can have these type of conversations with people that have lost babies because it's their lived experience. But for those who have not lived that, it can be very uncomfortable. And so we always say, get comfortable being uncomfortable in this
Mhm.
space. And I think the biggest thing you can do is be a listening ear because oftentimes we don't share because we don't feel supported in that sharing. And you have to get very vulnerable when you talk about a baby loss. And so I
Yeah.
think people just aren't ready, but I think by opening up and having these conversations, it allows us to kind of set the table to have more conversations like this.
Absolutely, absolutely. And thank you for sharing that and coming on this platform to talk about it. One of the
Mhm.
things that I heard you say is we call this the baby loss community.
Yes.
Can you talk and maybe describe for us different types of loss and potentially the different emotional and psychological impacts it has on parents? I know that's two questions, but
Yeah, yeah.
yeah,
No, that makes total sense. So as a background, after I lost my son, I was like, I know there's like something that I want to do too. Like, I just wanted to make sure that other parents that followed in my footsteps, because once I learned like this is very common, like
right,
when I was like, "Oh, I'm like a one-off, like, this doesn't really happen," and then I started to do research, and I was like, "Oh, this happens very much so very often, but we don't hear about it." So I found this, like, almost I call it, like, this underground community on social media, and I learned so much. Like, again, stillbirth was the first time when it happened to me, that was the first time I heard about it. So a stillbirth is typically 20 weeks or higher. So you can have and you can go all the way to full term. I know moms who have lost their babies at 40 weeks and beyond. But a miscarriage is 20 weeks or less. And depending on which state you're in, they kind of categorize it differently. Um, and I say there is no grief that is trumps another. So some parents that experience stillbirth because they are we have to birth our babies. You can elect to hold them and see them and have pictures with them. Some parents elect not to do that. But we did all the above. So you are actually holding, so it's like you're going through a birth, but they're there's no baby to see afterwards. You don't get to
Hmm.
take any baby home, versus a miscarriage, which is where, you don't necessarily see the baby. It's still in its little fetal form. And so there's a lot that comes with that, where I feel like with me, I at least feel like I got a little bit of closure. With some moms that experience miscarriage, they don't know the sex of their baby yet, or the gender. They may not be that far along where they've even told anyone. So they often do this in silence and
Hmm.
behind this wall of secrecy, because nobody knew that they were pregnant yet. They didn't tell anyone. So that's a grief of its own, where you're like, you don't feel like you have that piece of closure. I met moms who have lost their babies in the NICU. And there's they may have a living child that they have to care for along with the baby that died. And so there's a grief in that. And there's also, we call it termination for medical reasons. So this is if you get a diagnosis that is kind of grave and you have to make this really tough decision. And there's grief in that. So no matter where you lose your baby, on how many weeks you were, I always say, if you considered yourself a mom, whether you lost your baby on day 1 or week 40, it doesn't matter. The grief is still there.
Yeah, 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 yeah. And when you talk about grief, can you describe potentially some of the common feelings and experiences of grief and what that was like for you and maybe some other moms that may have spoken with before?
No problem.
Jesus.
I think,
Need more coffee.
yeah. In my book, I talk about the 3 S's. So the silent secrecy and shame of grief. And those were like the initial feelings I had. Silence, because again, we don't talk about this often. Then the secrecy is because we don't talk about it, we're often isolated. And so we're dealing with all these emotions by ourselves, and we don't know that this is typical par for the course when you're grieving. And then the shame of it all is like, shame and guilt kind of creep their way in, because it's like, I wish I could have done something different. I wish I would have spoken up. Maybe if I didn't feel the baby move, I should have said something earlier. Maybe, there's all these what ifs, maybes. And so if you get boggled down by yourself in isolation, those things can almost like haunt you, where it's like, if I only had done this, then this could have changed. And so you just kind of get boggled down with that, a lot of those emotions. But the gamut of emotions can arise: anger, sadness. You can find even joy sometimes in that, which also can feel like you're dishonoring your baby, because it's like, how can
Hmm.
I be happy and my baby just died? So there's just
Hmm.
like a gamut of emotions that can arise. And I always say it's different for literally every griever. No grief is alike, but just honoring that space wherever you are in those emotions.
Yeah, yes, absolutely. And you mentioned your it's called Still Here, a memoir of love, loss, and triumph after stillbirth. And
Mhm.
can you talk about that book? And, we know what kind of brought that about, but can you talk a little bit about maybe what you what you share in there and what parents can take away from it?
Absolutely. So I think I wrote this book threefold. One was to honor my son's legacy, because I and my husband were the only ones in the room when he was born. And so it was like to make sure I stamped the time in his life that he was here, like, because
Hmm.
sometimes it can almost feel like a dream. Like, was I even pregnant? You don't have anything to show for that
Hmm.
pregnancy. And so it was just to make sure that I honored him, make sure that he had his own piece of my journey out, that I can do that. The second reason was to honor my own grief. I felt that writing was very therapeutic for me. I've always loved to write, but it just helped me to get all the jumbled mess in my mind out. And
Right.
so being able to do that in this book form felt very therapeutic for me as his mom. But also, very early on in my experience, I knew, like, I have to share this. And I used to have a fashion blog at the time. And so naturally, because people on my blog saw me pregnant, I talked about my loss openly, and I was like, I know this is a hard shift from clothes, but when I opened up about it, people really resonated with the transparency of it all. And so I knew that I was onto something when I was like, I have to share my story in order for the person behind me to not feel so alone and know that they too can honor their baby in whatever way they can, and they can honor their grief and their journey as a mom. So those were the reasons that I shared my story. And in the book, I talk about what it's like when you go in the hospital, what that experience can be, things that you maybe don't think about. Like, for instance, we had to make a decision on, did we want our son cremated? Did we want him to be buried somewhere? Like, these are things that you don't typically think about so early on in
Mm-hmm.
life. We were making a lot of like long standing decisions in a very quick amount of time. So they're like, do you want
Right.
to see him? Do you want to name him? Do you, do you want to hold him? Do you
Mm-hmm.
want pictures? And there's like all these questions. And so I wanted to make sure that if somebody happened to go through this experience and they could get a hold of my book quickly, that they knew that process so they weren't caught off guard like my husband and I were. And just it also chronicles me getting pregnant again and
Yes.
what that was like, and that pregnancy was my toughest by far out of the 3.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yeah.
Mentally, emotionally, physically, like, it was a lot. So I was able to chronicle what that process was like for me also, because we got pregnant 6 months after DJ died, so
Yeah, yeah. I was gonna ask if there's anything in that story that you want to share, because you spoke about in loss there's also joy, and there's
yeah,
also, potentially happiness, right? And 6 months is so soon after. And how do you shift psychologically from loss to, let me be excited about this new life, or in being scared potentially, right?
yeah, yeah.
Fearful of what could potentially happen. Can you talk a little bit about what you went through in that and your husband?
Absolutely. So I think the biggest thing for me, and my husband, were that we were like, we're just gonna let God do this, whatever his timing may be. And so we weren't necessarily not trying to have another baby, but we weren't like, it has to happen right away. And so it happened. And when we got pregnant, the first time we told no one. This time we literally were like, call your parents, call our brothers, and like, we need to have a village around us to insulate us from what we're about to experience.
Mhm.
And like I said before, I think this was my toughest pregnancy. Physically, I was fine. Mentally, a mess. And
Mhm.
so I think it took a lot of me being connected through my faith with God. I would wake up, I would journal, I would read scripture, devotionals, my family. My dad is a pastor. So I was rooted in faith, but my faith was tested for sure with motherhood. Um, just like really believing in what God has said for us, for our family. So we would have our family like pray for us and just speak encouraging words over us. And I think those milestones where it's like, okay, my son died at 28 weeks. So when, up to that point, I like struggle. I'm like, oh my God, am I going to fall off the cliff when I get to 28 weeks? Is the same thing going to happen? And for me, it did not. My son was born 6 weeks early. So we had to deal with the process of him being in the NICU for a week. And that was a lot because I was like excited he was here, but it's like that trauma all over again of leaving the hospital without him for a week. So a lot of things arose during that process, but I think it was nice to have a village around me on that second pregnancy, even though it
Yeah.
was really difficult. And I think the one thing that I love that I did during that pregnancy, I kept DJ along with my rainbow baby who's Grayson. I honored them both. And so when I had my baby shower, we had a rainbow shower. And so it was everybody came and they dressed in like different colors of the rainbow. And my friend
Oh,
that
that's
put it
beautiful.
together was with me when I lost my son. And so
Mhm.
she was the person that coordinated it. And I told her I had one condition. I wanted to make sure DJ was honored in that capacity, but also to celebrate Grayson. And so I tell all lost parents that if you are pregnant again, there is no shame in honoring your baby because they were real. Their story matters just as much, but also you don't have to feel conflicted in the celebration and the joy of honoring new life. And so you can honor your baby that died and celebrate your baby to come. So
Mhm.
um it was a tough one, but I am grateful for the experience to
Yeah.
mother again, living children. So
Yeah, absolutely. Can you, if you, I'm sure it's probably going to be hard, but if you could say, um, something that this experience taught you, right,
oh,
in your journey, right?
mhm.
Like it could be one, two, three, five, however many you want to drop, but something that this experience taught you going into your new experience with your two living children. Like, what has this experience given you to take with you?
Oh my gosh, so many lessons. And I think looking back, it's a lot easier. When you're in it, it doesn't it's like there's literally nothing, no joy. Like even when I had my rainbow baby, I'm like, but I still have a baby that's missing, you know? And like when people see my family out, they think, "Oh, you have 2 babies and that's you're complete." And it's like, "No, there's always something missing." But one thing I think it taught me for sure was empathy because you
Hmm.
literally like if you saw me on the street, you would not know that I had a baby that died. And so it taught me that literally everyone is dealing with something and that
Hmm.
we should treat people with care, with kindness, because you literally don't know how your interaction with someone else can impact them, whether for good or bad. I
Yeah.
remember in grief where there were people who said the most ridiculous things to me that altered my day, and those that really embraced what I was going through and how that made me feel. And
Hmm.
so I try to be somebody that can bring light to people no matter what it doesn't have to be baby loss, but I mean, there's people that are just dealing with so many things on a daily basis. And so I think that was one of the biggest lessons it taught me was really be empathetic to people because everyone is carrying something. And
Yes.
two, just relying on God. Like I heard it as a kid. I literally grew up in church. So hear these things. Oh, God, trust God, rely on your faith. You need faith is the size of a mustard seed and all that. And it's like, yep, that's cute. Until you
Hmm.
get thrust into
Right.
the
Until
and it's like,
until you in
oh,
the storm.
I really
Okay.
gotta hold on to the because I really feel like I'm hanging on by like 2 fingers, like
Right. That mustard
something like
seed is
that.
looking real small right now.
Lord, when you said mustard seed, I get it because literally that's all I got. I don't have
Yes.
much to give you.
Hmm.
But like just to know, I had some. Me and Guy had some. We had some conversations. I'm really me. Like, why would you let
Right.
this happen to me? But once I was like really by myself, and I felt His presence in the grief, but also in the joy of being able to say, I have my rainbow baby and I have 2 living kids that, they have just sprinkled joy back into my life. You know, it felt good to be able to say, like, this is literally my testimony. Like when you're younger and you hear testimony service, you're like, okay, but it's like, this is
Hmm.
real. Like, I
Right.
have seen the darkness and I got pulled into the light. And so just trying again to be that light for other people to know, like, hold on, and it may not look how you think. Like some people never get their rainbow baby, and being
Right.
okay whatever the journey, it's like you have to make a life that you can be incredibly proud of, and sometimes that may not include motherhood even though you were on that journey for some time. So I try to meet people where they are in whatever situation that they may be dealing with.
Yeah, yeah, that's beautiful, and I think that's something that more people could, baby loss or not, could take with them just in general. There's
Yeah.
so much going on in our society and our world, and it takes nothing to not be. I want to say
Yeah.
it's choice words, but you know what I'm
Yes.
saying. Like, you
Yes.
don't even have to say anything, but to just be. not nice or
Yeah.
unkind for no
Yeah.
reason. You know what I mean? There's so much
Yes.
going on. And so I wish more people could take that. I want to shift into just
Yeah.
kind of asking you in terms of like a lot of our conversations on this episode talk a lot about society and,
Mhm.
we are African American, Black women, women of
Yes.
color in society. And you talked a little bit earlier about how there's not a lot of us in this community. And it's obviously probably because of the societal stigmas that surround
Mhm.
the loss. Can you talk
Yeah.
a little bit about some of those societal stigmas that you see or that are happening?
So I want to preface this by saying I used to do support groups for this organization, and the support group that I facilitated was specifically for Black, Indigenous, and people of color. And so that space was so rewarding because we really got a chance to like take off the mask that we typically wear out and
Mhm.
get very real. And one of the things that I heard Black women specifically say often is we are not afforded space to grieve.
Mm.
Typically, in the world, we are considered the workhorses. You're so strong, Black girl magic. Everything is like about what we can produce
And
and
overcome.
who we are. Yes, you're so strong. And in one of our support groups, I literally had this epiphany of like, our ancestors literally went through trauma daily and literally had to get up and act like nothing happened. So it was literally a matter of life and death. Like if they did not do the
Mhm.
work, they could, their life could be taken. And so I
Right.
think ancestrally, we've learned how to push all the things down.
Mhm.
It was a piece of survival. So I honor that in that a lot of us don't share our story because we either don't feel it's significant enough. We see examples in the world where it's like, oh, I have to be strong. And so we don't allow ourselves the moment to be vulnerable and to break. And I think
Yeah.
it's so important that you allow yourself to literally sit in the grief as somebody that has experienced it, because I always say you cannot outrun grief. It will find you. It may show up in a way that you don't want it to, but it's
Mhm.
going to find you
Mhm.
somehow, some way. So I always say for the griever, sit in it. Allow it to, like, let the emotion come. Get mad, be sad, like let the tears come. That's okay. That's part of the process. And like if you think of it from a standpoint of grief is love, it makes sense. Why wouldn't I
Yeah.
grieve the baby that I loved? Like
Right.
that
Right.
part of the process. So for that piece, the griever absolutely honor whatever grief brings. Like you don't have to be afraid of grief. It is literally a part of life's process, right? Everybody grieves something. But for the people that are the support of the grief, I would say honor the space of one being uncomfortable. It's going to get uncomfortable. Like we don't want to talk about babies that die. It is what it is. But if you can just be a safe space, a listening ear, and sometimes that means sitting in silence, but your presence alone can make the world of a difference. But even if you want to do something small, like if the griever wants to say their baby's name, use the baby's name. Like it's okay. Like a lot of people are like, well, I don't want to make them sad. We're already sad. It's okay. Like
Mhm.
you can
Mhm.
mention it. You can talk about it. If there's a specific day for my son was born January 18th, so we considered that his birthday. And so people text me on his birthday. Like acknowledge that little thing can mean so much.
Mhm.
You know, down the line, especially after people start to like, the condolences stop, the cards
Mhm.
stop coming, the support stops. Like just remembering that one date every year and just like, I'm thinking about you today. I know today's rough. That's it. It doesn't
Yeah.
have to be profound. Like, just really sitting with the griever and allowing them, to dictate the pace of how you interact and not
Yeah.
keeping them like isolated.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. I mean, and then also, I guess one of the questions I have for moms who may be going through this experience, right? And they're not really sure where to come, and they get your book and they're like, okay, but what if I don't want to do any of this? What if I just want to forget? Have you
Yeah,
experienced women who, and like, how do you process
absolutely.
that? Like, don't text me. Don't just like,
Yeah,
I want to let
yeah.
it go. Yeah.
I always say take the cues of the griever because
Mhm.
literally grief is different. For me, talking about it, sharing it, speaking on it, social media, it was all part of my journey. But there are some people that are like, I don't want you to say my baby's name. I don't want you to honor. I want to just keep it moving. And in that, honor that. Like, let them set the pace of where it is. But I think oftentimes we assume that, people don't want to have these type of conversations, and it just may be because they don't feel safe, and so they don't.
Yeah.
And that's just their mechanism to, like, keep themselves safe. Their story is sacred, and you don't have to share your story with everybody. That's another thing. Like, yes,
Mhm.
I'm vocal about it because this I feel like this is part of my ministry, my journey, but you don't have to share your story with everyone. You can, even if you share it with yourself. Like, a lot of times we don't give ourselves the space to go there because it's
Mhm.
scary. Like, to sit in your grief, to acknowledge this feeling because you don't know what can come up behind that. So I say, if you don't want to talk to anybody, write it for yourself. Make a video of yourself talking about it. And it doesn't have to see the light of day, but just so you can have it for you to get it out. And you don't
Mhm.
ever have to talk about it ever again if you don't want to. But always
Yeah.
take cues from the griever for sure.
Yeah, yeah. And you just kind of touched on something that segues into my next question. It's just like, what types of supports are out there for moms who, and moms? I keep saying moms. This episode, this show's for moms, but dads experience loss as well.
Yeah.
So, what types of
Yes.
supports are out there for parents who are experiencing child loss, baby
So
loss?
there's a lot of different avenues, and it's a lot more than even when I first entered the space. My son was born in 2016, so it's been 9 years since his death. And I've seen the baby loss community online grow. So there's like literally dozens, hundreds of like content creators that talk about grief, in general, but also
Mhm.
specifically baby loss. So I say find who resonates with you because not everybody has your same moral compass and everybody doesn't treat grief the same. So find,
Mhm.
because especially when you're like new in the space, it can be overwhelming, it could be triggering, and you may be even offended by things that some people say because they may not align with your belief system. So find your tribe. But there's also support groups. There are like retreats that you can attend. And for dads specifically, it's a little bit tougher just because of, again, the stigma of what it's like for the guy to, you're supposed to be the strong one. There's all these
Mhm.
what it looks like to grieve. And so I want to mention, in my book, my husband actually wrote a chapter, and I
Oh, that's
was
beautiful.
floored when I read it the first time,
Mhm.
like through him submitting to my editor. And I was like, I didn't know any of this happened because
Mhm.
he wanted to be so strong for me that he suppressed his grief to make
Right.
sure that I was okay. And so check on the dads too, that they are grieving
Mhm.
and they need support. And that, just in society in general, men don't typically share, like, especially these type of feelings that are so vulnerable. So give them the space even if they don't want to. My husband did a lot with, like, physically went to the gym, played basketball, hung out with
Mhm.
friends, but make sure they have an outlet as well to
Yeah,
grieve.
yeah. That's great, and I'm glad you mentioned that. We don't wanna forget the dads.
I know.
Um, and, you raised this question, or not this question, you raised this topic of, advocacy and awareness.
Yes.
Why is it important to raise awareness about stillbirth and maternal loss for you?
Ooh, again, it's just so important because our numbers are increasing. America's numbers in general for loss are horrific. Like, as a developed country, we are like at the bottom when it comes to measures to prevent this. And oftentimes it is preventable.
Mhm.
But because there aren't parameters in place to catch it early on, we lose baby. So the number that sticks in my head for stillbirth is 65. So 65 families every day lose a baby to
Wow.
stillbirth. And you wouldn't know that because we don't talk
Mm,
about it. And so I actually have done some advocacy work with a group. I took a screenshot because I wanted to make sure I said it correctly. But it is Shine for Autumn is the legislature that we've been trying to pass, and SHINE stands for Stillbirth, Health, Improvement, in Education. And this is from a mom who also lost her daughter to stillbirth 10 plus years ago. And she wanted to do something to help other families prevent this outcome because
mhm,
hers was actually preventable.
mhm,
And so we've done rounds and rounds of trying to get this legislation passed in Congress. We've gotten close the
mhm.
past 2 years, but it still has not passed. And this is just to keep record of what's happening because a lot of times they're not tracking what's happening. So we can't fix it if we don't even know like why this,
Yeah.
we need funding for research and things like that. So that is important, but also just if you don't have to be on a grand scale, like just supporting the people in your community and offering up resources. So again, there's countless things online that you can get connected to, and if any of your listeners want those resources, I can absolutely point them in the right direction if they need that support.
Yes, absolutely. Which just goes right into my next question, which was just going to be about you and your work and how listeners can support you, work with you. Do you offer any programs? Can they meet with you in any groups? Like what are you doing in the space that any of our moms can connect with you on? Whether it be just asking a question of a link,
Yeah,
even just
yeah.
yeah. Can you share that?
So I'm mostly on Instagram. I know a lot of people have said I should get on TikTok. I don't know how much longer it'll be here, but
Ooh, child, not long, maybe. Who knows?
but I am on Instagram. So if you DM me, just say, hey, like this is what I'm looking for. But if you would like to work with me more one on one, I have started a coaching business. And so I help with loss and just life transitions in general. And it's just important that we hold space for our grief. And so, I try to be a resource any way I can. So my Instagram is Ali, Ali, Andy, Ande, Enterprise, Enterprise. So if you find me there, we can kind of connect and then I can point you to whatever you need.
Yeah.
But please feel free to reach out. I love to meet
Yes.
people.
And we're gonna have all of that in the show notes, and it'll be linked. So if anybody is driving and don't need
Yeah.
to type it right down right now, you'll be able to get it. Be safe. We will link it for you. And just to kind of get us to our closing of the episode, I always ask my guests if they could give our moms, our listeners, a message of hope and healing. What would it be? Right? Like, what would you share? What would that lasting message be?
Yeah, I think the biggest thing is honor your grief wherever you may be. Um, and it doesn't have to look like anybody else. Like your grief doesn't have to look like mine, where you're an advocate and you're writing books and speaking out loud. Like it could literally be a quiet force that only you acknowledge. But do whatever feels right for you as the griever, and it will come to you. And it changes as the years pass. I'm 9 years into this. So my grief on day one looked very different from year nine. So honor where you are in your grief. And if I could share, there's two scriptures that I wanted to share today. One is First Peter 5:7. Let me make sure I have it. And that is sorry. So it says, cast all your anxiety on him because he cares for you. So God knows, he sees you, he will sit with you in your grief, in your time of need. But the last one I wanted to share is my favorite verse, Jeremiah 29:11. And it's, for I know the plans I have for you, declares the Lord, plans to prosper you and not to harm you, plans to give you hope in a future. So even though loss can feel encompassing, there is a future of hope that God wants for you. And so ride the wave of grief, but there is light and love and hope and joy and all those things on the other side. So Don't give up and find community. And if you need community, find me. I will try to
Yes.
help you as much as I can, but don't do this alone. You don't have to do this
Yes. Yes, yes, absolutely. Thank you so much for saying that.
alone.
I love that you close on you don't have to do this alone. Our mantra at So Well is it takes a village to raise a mother
Yes,
because it does.
it does.
And so whether your journey into motherhood is in baby loss or you in pregnancy or you have a real baby, whatever that experience may look like, don't do it alone. As my guest has said here today, I'm going to share resources from you in this show, but also if anyone is looking for a community at all, we have our Mom Space community that you can join as well. I know that today's topic was really heavy and deep, and I'm
Yeah.
so thankful for you for sharing your mom and your motherhood journey with us today on this episode. I truly do appreciate you being an advocate in this space, being a Black woman in this space, speaking up so ferociously and with faith as well, because like I shared earlier with you, it's not seen, and so I'm thankful for you being on this platform to do that for our
Thank
moms.
you so much for having me. I appreciate this. And I pray for all of your listeners, no matter where they are in their motherhood journey, that they be kept in the challenging times, but also that they find joy.
Yes, absolutely. Thank you so much. Until next time, mama, stay well and stay whole, and I'll see you next time on the So Well podcast.
Bye.
Hit the notification bell wherever you are listening to us today and join us next week as we delve into more mental health conversations. The So Well community offers a safe ground for the transformative healing and restoration of intergenerational trauma, ensuring moms of color have a space to rewrite their stories, recover, live well, be seen, and heard. Join us online and on Instagram at So Well for daily inspiration, blogs, events, and more. See you next time. The Stonewall podcast is for educational and entertainment purposes only. We are not doctors, therapists, or medical professionals, and the content shared here is based on personal experiences and research, and it should not be taken as medical or therapeutic advice. Please consult a qualified professional for any mental health or medical concerns.